Well, hey guys, it's Mike from Just Car People Things. We are working on our 2015 Lexus GX460 today. This has been our daily driver. This is the car my wife drives every day, and she adores it. But we're at about 119, 120,000 miles, and it is time to put new spark plugs in it. And it is not a particularly complicated job. We got to move some things out of the way, so we'll just kind of go through that and show you guys how it's done. First thing you got to do is you got to pop this cover off, this Lexus branded cover. It's got a couple spots. It sits on top of the motor on little isolation mounts. Stay there. We'll get that all cleaned up. We got a detail under the hood too. It's probably been 20 or 30,000 miles since we've really cleaned up under the hood. So we'll do that when we're done, once everything's back together. But really, more than anything, want to get the old spark plugs out, want to get the new ones in. It is a pretty straightforward job. Essentially, if you have a 10mm socket handy, you remove some harness, get some things out of the way, you pull the coil packs out, you get your long socket down in there, or a spark plug specific socket, and then you replace those parts, those spark plugs, with some NGK laser iridiums. These are the correct part number. We ordered them off the internets, and so these will then be good to go in. You need 8 of them. This is about $70 to $80. These plugs run about 10 bucks each. So very easy, relatively straightforward job, but it does take a little bit of work to kind of get things done. So one of the first things I've done is I've disconnected our airbox, over here, just the 4 little flick disconnects, just like that. Pulled this harness item right out here. We've loosened this guy up to be able to take this boot. Essentially, you don't have to fully remove it from the vehicle, but you need to get it up and out of the way. So if you work at it a little bit, you can actually see, you can just rotate it up and out of the way. We'll have to unclip that wiring harness in the back there. We'll do that real quick right back here. We'll unclip that. But that will allow you to just move this out of the way and then gain access to the passenger side for spark plugs. But as you can see, once you look underneath there, again, you've got some wiring items you need to pop loose and get out of the way. But right here is one of our coil packs. Those just go back into the back of the vehicle here. And really, more than anything, it's just kind of moving stuff around to be able to gain access to it. Throttle body actually looks pretty good, pretty clean. It was actually pretty dirty on our Tundra the last time we had this particular part off. So everything looks pretty good. One thing I do want to caution on, and something worth thinking about, is I'll probably grab a rag or a shop towel and actually stuff it into this space. This is exposed space going right into the motor. The filter is right here. So air is getting drawn up through there, through this intake, in there. And if you drop anything in there, any metal parts, anything silly, you don't think about it, you don't hear it, something happens, you do not want to suck that stuff into your motor, directly into your heads and your valve train. So very bad news. So we'll just patch this up, probably with a piece of rag or something easy, and kind of go from there. So we'll remove a few more things, kind of keep tinkering here, and then jump right back into filming and showing you a little bit more of what we're working on. Well, okay guys, one thing I always recommend before you get started on a project like this and start disassembling stuff is to make sure you have your kind of mise en place all here, which in cooking is having your kit, having all your stuff ready to go. You're going to need a spark plug socket tool. I particularly like this guy. It's got the extension, 10-inch extension built on. It actually has the magnetic retention. You can see there, that fits. This is the right size. So we just want to validate all that stuff before we get too far into our process for installing these. And obviously we want to be a little careful about the electrode. But we're going to set those just right here beside us, just so they're not right underfoot here. If we don't ding them up, we don't want to. But I've got here, I was using this small screwdriver to pop off some of our protective plastic coverings. Phillips screwdriver just to get some of the initial stuff off here. Always good to have your screwdrivers handy. Also got a torque wrench, 3/8 drive torque wrench. This is going to allow us to make sure that our spark plugs are seated at the right torque thresholds, just to make sure they don't pop loose, which is always a bad time. 3/8 ratchet, 10mm socket with a long 3/8 extension. This is actually a bit of a wobbler extension, so you can push it all the way on and it's pretty firm, or you can pop it loose and have a bit of a wobble. I find that to be really helpful when you're working on some angles. Again, our spark plug socket We have a small 10 millimeter and then a couple small extensions, 3 different extensions, including a long wobble for this size 1/4 inch drive, 10 millimeter. So pretty much everything we're working on is 10 millimeters. The retention bolts are all 10 millimeter. So when you look down here at one of your coil packs right here that you're going to need to remove, you'll unclip the harness, you know, like maybe so. I got to push really hard in that little plastic tab, but that'll pop up and off there, and that'll allow that to come loose. We'll also want to try to peel this harness back and maybe pop some of the retainers that are holding this harness in place. We did remove this from the airbox. This is a sensor, an airflow sensor connection. We removed this small vacuum tube from the back of it. Don't forget that guy. Your check engine light will go on later and you'll think you killed your car, and it's really you just forgot to plug that in. We've covered up our inlet with a microfiber just so nothing can get in there. We want to make sure we don't drop anything down into the actual motor itself. That would be catastrophic. And then remove this evap hose as well from the airbox to pull the airbox off. I do have the filter sitting loose here right now. I'm probably actually going to remove the filter and flip it over when I set it down. And this has a little bit of dirt in it, but it actually, I only replaced this a few thousand miles ago, so this guy still looks pretty good relatively. But I like putting it down on a clean space, facing that direction, and that way nothing will get on the backside, so when you reinstall it, there's no risk of, again, sucking something into your engine, which would be a disaster. I am thinking I will probably need to remove the airbox cover itself, which is pretty straightforward here. Is Toyota going to be, oh no, they're not 10s. Wow. Times have changed. Everything on my Tundra is a 10. Those look like 12s. But those 2 bolts will allow this airbox to just pop out and then give me plenty of room to work all the way back, even to this guy back here, way back buried and back, to go from there. But this looks like a pretty straightforward job. You just kind of got to take some time and move some things around, and we'll take a crack at it and see how it goes. So I'll jump back in once we get this airbox cover removed. I'm also going to take some time to clean that airbox cover, because man, like, what's not cool is seeing all that dust, and this is all from, you know, driving in relatively sandy conditions. You can see all that dust down in there, and you know, you'll find stuff in airboxes like leaves, which you don't want to have your air filter fighting with. You might as well just pop this out, take it over to your sink, wash it good, let it dry while you're doing this work, and then when you reinstall it, it'll be nice and clean, and you're not going to have your air filter kind of fighting against itself with all this crap inside of there. So we'll probably actually start working on the other bank, just because I think that's a little more open, and then we'll kind of go from there. But that's our tool set to get started. I always find I end up grabbing more stuff and bringing it over as I go, but this is kind of what I think I'll need initially. And I already need a 12 millimeter socket that I didn't know I needed, so that will be another item to add to this pile. But nice on the GX, you've got a little bit of a tool tray with this right here. If I didn't have this, I'd probably actually have my cart over here and just have the cart sitting right here just to make life a little easier. So cheers, guys. We'll keep going through the process and have you guys jump back in here in a few minutes when we're probably getting that first coil pack out, just to show how that all works. Okay, guys, we're a little further along in our process, managed to get one of our first bolts loose, so I want to show you. Oh, don't want to lose that. Let's just set that up like that. I might get a cup or a little tray for those, just because I don't want to lose anything. I washed out the airbox. This is just, I dried it, but it's going to finish drying out here in the next hour or two as I finish this project. There are actually 3 of these bolts. They are 12 millimeter. One is right there inside the airbox, the other is right there inside the airbox, and the third one is actually towards the firewall on the passenger side of the vehicle. So this is, if you're looking in the car, how it sits basically this way in the car. This is your scoop here, and you know, like all great off-road vehicles, there's actually a drain hole here in the airbox, which is really funny to mention. But those bolts will just all hang out right in here. I've got the passenger or driver's side cover. This goes around. I'm going to flip it over here. It's got 4 tabs in it. That goes around the brakes, the brake system. There's the brake system fill. And then I've got the passenger side one, which is just a cover for some hoses in the corner. And then, of course, we have our airbox. Again, don't forget this little guy to reattach that. We've got our airflow sensor there that was on there, and then this was the bigger Phillips head to remove that, but this just slotted right off. So might take some time to actually clean some of this stuff up too. We'll see how it goes towards the end of the project. That's not as critical if it gets wet from that side. So that said, we are now fully opened up here to be able to undertake this little procedure. And I do want to highlight just something I noticed and emphasize the importance of having a couple different 10mm options for doing this. And I don't mean all the different Glocks out there in 10mm, I mean in sockets. So what we got here is this guy on a wobble, and that'll of course tighten up, you know, and be less wobbly if you push down in a little bit. But that being said, could get onto some of this, couldn't get onto this. So this guy here with the brake lines, you can see right here with the brake lines, the easiest way to get that coil pack bolt off is actually to snake in there with almost a 10-inch long extension on that bolt. And so sometimes that'll happen, and you just got to make sure to remove your socket safely and then remove that bolt. You do not want to drop any of these, so please, 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 if you're doing this, take your time, kind of feel around for where you're in the right spot, and you'll notice the bolt will pop free right there. And that's one of your coil pack bolts. This bolt right here, this 10mm, pull the light back so you can see a little better. This 10mm that we nearly lost, that holds this on. This is your harness for your ignition. So this has got a bunch of sensor stuff in it. It runs through the side of the motor there. And what we'll want to do as we work on this is that allows us just to move this up and out of the way, and that should let us, if we give a good yank on a coil pack, actually pop the coil pack completely loose. Now this guy, you've got a bolt there. Personally, I like to expose all four of them, you know, have all four coil packs loose before I start doing stuff. There's another coil pack bolt. There's one right here I got to get on. That's a coil pack bolt. But you should be able to, in theory, especially because this guy's got a pretty long piece of wiring on it, you should be able to actually pull that almost all the way out of there. So we'll get everything loosened up, but I did just want to highlight those couple things as I'm working here. 3 12mm bolts in the airbox. Make sure you have a variety of extensions and options for 10mm, because otherwise you're just not going to be able to get into some of these spaces, because you are working around some of this stuff, and it does pop loose. You know, there are, you know, mechanisms to snap these things out of their retainers and stuff, but if you can avoid doing it, just work around. So that's where we're at right now. We'll show you a little more as we get some of these guys loose and sort of what the plugs look like, and what you'll need in terms of force and, you know, everything else to get them out. So cheers so far. Well folks, after a little bit of cajoling, we got our first plug out, number 1 here on the driver's side. And this is a used plug, and this has about 119,000 miles on it. And this is pretty much what they're supposed to look like. You've got decent color on it, no crazy carbon, doesn't look burned up. Actually, these still have what looks to be pretty decent sparking gap left on them. So the thing about the replacement plugs is that these guys do not, they don't need anti-seize. They've got a crush washer. You can see the difference in the crush washers, I hope, right there. And this guy will just go right back in. You don't need to gap these. You can check them. The spec's like 0.43 or 0.44 inch or 1.1 millimeter-ish. But basically what you want to do is take this and get it slotted back in and make sure that it seats and does not cross thread. And that can be a little bit tough because sometimes you're working with a tool that's not square. So do your best to get the tool seated and then square it up. So we're going to come in. I've got an extra light going right now, so hopefully you guys can see this pretty well. But we're just going to lift everything out of the way, get a nice clean shot in there, and just try to be cognizant of where we're heading. And you just want to basically rest it down there. And what I love to do is just spin it backwards a little bit, and usually you'll just sort of feel it drop in. I just felt it in the tips of my fingers. It just sort of dropped in. And now you see I'm threading this in right now. There's no resistance at all, 0 resistance. If you run into any resistance here and it gets hard or complicated to turn this, and you need to get a ratchet to try to nail it down, quick run away, because you've probably gotten yourself into a situation now where it is cross-threaded, and that's just going to be a really bad time. I will say it took a fair amount of torque to break it loose. I actually had to get a 12-inch breaker to do this, but I just felt that seat down at the bottom, and that's tight now with finger tight. And what we're going to do is we are going to grab our torque wrench right here, and I am going to stop right now and look up what the torque spec is for these plugs, because that is the one thing I haven't looked up. So give me 1 sec, I'll be right back, and I'll show you how to do the next plug down too. And I think then we can just sort of work our way through the rest of these and jump in with more video content when you guys need it. But I will be right back with you one more time just to go check that torque spec, because I don't want to do this wrong. Correct spec is approximately 15 foot-pounds according to the factory service manual. Way lighter than I thought, so certainly glad I didn't do it to 40 like I just said. So let's put that down in the 15. There's 10. That's 20. Where are we at here? No, that's 15. Okay, cool. We're good right there. Torque that down. This is pretty light. You actually might want to even use a wrench in inch-pounds and do the conversion on that. So that being said, we can just slot this on. Hopefully that fits into there. There we go. And we'll just come through, give it a couple turns, and I can actually feel that torque, that crush washer crushing. There's a lot of play here past finger tight. There it is. And now we're able to remove this and get this guy out, and that's it. Plug number 1 is done. That's it. That's the whole process. What I typically like to do with these is I like to take them and I like to set them. I'm usually doing them in order, but I did check the gap on these too. This is about 1.1 right there, and these are still just right on the button for factory gaps. These are in great shape, but we can just set that there. And what I usually like to do is I'll just go in order. So number 1 sits there, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and once we're done, we'll have them all lined up, and then we can inspect and make sure they're all looking good. So let's show you real quick how to pop this next guy off. So this one, we're going to take our coil pack, and we're just going to take our coil pack right back in and on, and make sure that seats down in there. Should the little emphasization here get back into place. And you can actually, I did get a bucket for all these, take your number 10 here, and just slot that back on and just get it started, just so it doesn't come loose. And we'll torque all those down when we're done. So that guy is back into place. So let's take a look at this next guy. I think it's actually the most visible of the bunch. So we can just pull this almost straight out. That will allow us to get that out of the way. You can just flip this around and move it up out of the way. We're going to take this guy and our breaker. I'm going to slot that right down into there. And you'll usually feel it kind of connect up once it's right there. And so we'll just come through and try to, there it goes. That's it, broken loose. So it'll usually take a little force. It'll almost feel like it pops when it breaks, but usually we can just get it spinning just a little bit, and that will allow you to go to your more adult socket wrench here, yep. And this guy's kind of in an awkward spot. So again, I come back to, what's the worst thing you can do? You can throw another extension on it, and then you're working back here, back in clear air. So this is a little easier to work back here. You will find there's a fair amount of resistance the first couple threads, I tend to find, especially when you're using a bunch of extensions and it's kind of wobbly and all that other stuff, but it should get much easier. There you go. So you'll see you get to this point right here, and then you can actually pop this off altogether, and you can just do this by hand. So you should be able to just spin this now with your fingers or pretty close to. So once you get to this point, you just get it rolling, and this will come right out, hopefully, in a moment. And you'll know when it comes loose. We're getting close. You can absolutely feel it with the tips of your fingers getting close. And sometimes it'll kind of hang like on the end of the plug because like a little bit of carbon. So no harm in just going back to this. You see there's almost no resistance, but I just didn't have enough leverage with my fingers to handle that. And we're almost loose. A lot of spin on these threads, guys. Okay, now that's loose. That brings the plug right with it. yeah, you can see the carbon kind of here a little bit on it, and that's what's given us some trouble. But this plug looks really good too. This looks great for the mileage it's at. It looks really clean. So nice, nice, nice. I'm not mad about that at all. So we'll set that guy down. Number 2. These are factory gapped NGK laser iridiums. Iridium plugs from NGK don't need to be gapped. So you just want to be careful to just kind of visually inspect it and make sure it looks like it should. You can't tell without a feeler gauge, but if you see this thing bent or got damaged, maybe when it shipped or something, you just want to be cognizant of that. Seated in your magnetic. Okay, so that's nice and tight in there. And now we'll come back up. And again, just try to be real gentle. You can give it a little spin the wrong way. And once it gets going to go in, it'll just be super easy. You can actually almost just fly right in with it. So this is starting to seat. It takes a lot of spins to get to the bottom of that. There we go. Come on. Okay. We got a little awkwardness here with that long, these hoses, these evap system hoses or whatever they are. And so you do want to be cognizant about doing this just with the extensions, because you're never going to get lock up the way you want with all these extensions on it. Your torque numbers are going to be skewed probably a little bit. So what I like to do is I like to get it close, get it right there, make sure it's good, and then come back in now with just a single extension right there. If you can fit that on there somehow or another, and just double check and make sure you're good with your torque numbers. And that's it. That comes out. Coil goes back in. Try to keep the tip of that coil relatively clean if you can. Coil pack in. 10mm bolt. Get that seated into there. Make sure you don't strip that out, and just kind of want to find the right spot with it. Sometimes I find it's actually harder to get these stupid little bolts back in than it is to, there it is, than it is to actually get the plug in. So, but that's pretty much it. We're just going to work our way down right now towards the last plug and go from there on this side. And we'll jump in if there's any weird tips or tricks we need to show you in the meantime. But otherwise, we'll come back when we start putting things back together. Cheers, guys. All right, guys, we're switching over to the other side here, doing a little bit of work on this guy here. And a few notes on the other side. Overall, very, very easy. I did run into an issue with the back, very furthest back plug, because this is 10 inches and it's just a little bit too long. I would actually recommend, if you're buying one of these for this project that does not detach, see this guy doesn't come out of here, it's on a bearing, I would highly, highly recommend going to an 8-inch one for this particular job. It's just a little bit shorter. It's going to make it a little bit easier. I ended up having to go to an older 5/8 spark plug thing that I have that I can't stand. It's got an insert that's completely useless, but it is to get in there to tighten. It works to tighten once you get things dropped down in. So it was okay, but not great. So we move over to the other side. Cheers. It's been one of those types of jobs. Nice warm day for this. This first guy, very easy to work on. So the first plug over here, super easy to get to. Just popped the harness loose with a 10mm, popped the other harness loose back here with a 10mm, and we're just working our way through here. So get our lights situated and squared up. These magnetic lights are super handy for this sort of work. You can actually see down in there into the combustion chamber, so we want to be very careful, you know, with dropping anything or having that exposed space, because obviously anything that falls down in there is going to get burned and exit through your exhaust, you hope. So you can see again, this is squared up in there. It's just finger pressure to get it down to tight. And once it gets snug, we'll grab our torque wrench and just throw it on there. So see right there, we just hit the bottom of the threads. Now we're going to activate that crush washer by getting on there with our handy dandy you can feel that washer start to lock up, and right there, that's it. Check it again, and that's it, we're done. So this guy comes out, we'll pop that apart, we'll take our coil pack, slot it back in, and we can usually just kind of mess with that harness a little bit to get around. There we go. And that is that. So it is that quick to slide that back in, and you can see that's lined up right there. So now we just look for our long bolt, and that just goes right in there, and we'll just get that snug down once we're finished. Pretty straightforward. So we're gonna work our way back. I've got a funny feeling that that guy back there, way back there, you can see, is gonna be really a bit of a wrestling match. I do see that Toyota was kind enough to leave us some room here, some pass-through kind of room underneath in that space down there. So maybe that will slot out of there and it won't be too terrible, and we can work at it from kind of through right there. You can see my hand actually fits through this, where this relay box and those air conditioning pressure lines are. So we'll just try to work on those. All right, folks, well, we just got our last coil, or our last plug back in, and we had a little bit of time on the struggle bus with a few of the nuts and bolts that were over here, to say the least. And now I'm just struggling with making sure I get this coil pack back in the right direction and aren't messing up and winding the wiring up, which I seem to be in the process of doing. I might actually just pop this guy right off its respective connection there, which is not too bad to do. To do that, you just get in with a screwdriver right there, and usually once you get that popped up just like that, you can actually just slot it right out just like that. Magic. This little screwdriver, super handy. So with that, we're gonna come back in here. This is one of the few I've actually like fully disconnected in terms of, you can see down here, we're just trying to get it seated in the right spot. This is one of the few coil packs I've actually had to fully disconnect. But whoa, sometimes I spend more time fighting with this light than I do anything else. All right, where were we? Right here. And these hoses, you kind of got to work them around a little bit to get them into the right spot. These guys are all flexible down here, but you kind of end up fighting with them a little bit. So let's get this guy plugged back in. And nice positive click you want to hear. Go to our parts bin, grab our long 10mm bolt, and see if we can't get that seated. This was one of the toughest ones to get out, just in terms of there's a lot of stuff down in there, and it's easy to lose yourself in it a little bit. Nope. And I am totally blind doing this blind right now. You can't see. Maybe it's better from this direction. Yeah, much better. Hey, look at that. And if we get that into the right spot, doesn't feel like it. Well, we're gonna keep monkeying with this. Guys, the biggest thing I'll say to you about this job is you're gonna need a ton of extensions. I actually ended up grabbing just about every extension that I had, because some of these need a slightly different length. Some of them are a little easier in one way than the other. And really, that's the best advice I could give. I also grabbed this guy to do a little bit of work on pulling some of the mounts for the wiring harness. You can see this guy is loose. So now we got to go back through and reconnect all of these different little mounts. But first, before we do that, I actually even popped this guy off over here. But before we do that, what I want to do is torque down all of those 10mm bolts on the coil packs. And I actually found it easiest to do with like our 3/4 ratchet with no extensions on it. Depends on which one, but in this case you can just get on it, get it torqued down. And these don't take a lot of torque, guys. I mean, literally just make sure they're snug. So if you pour too much, there's plastic in there, and you're gonna be that guy that crushes the plastic. So here's a scenario we're in right now where that doesn't fit. It's just too big. So in which case, we're gonna go back to our tiny 10mm here and just work on this guy. And oh, let me get my wrench in the right direction. Sometimes you just get a little bit at a time, but that is pretty close to tight right there. There we go, a little quarter turn to tight. And we'll just jimmy that loose. This guy was a real pain in the butt to get on originally. I tried like 10 extensions and then just ended up wedging this very tiny little wrench I've got in there. And we can try to get it close to tight. But I got music on in the background. There's traffic going past. It's a busy Saturday. Oh, it's gone forever. No, I can actually see that. We've all been there when we drop something like this, but the good news is the wrench is pretty big, and so we have successfully recovered it with our 10mm socket. Nice, nice, nice. That last one in the back, don't laugh, but the way that I got to it was with like every extension I have hooked together. That was the easiest way to get on it. And we just took this guy and basically managed to slot that down through and weaved that down there all the way down to that 10mm bolt right there, which we're now gonna just get on really quick. And let's see if we can't. There we go, good and tight right there. That's it, folks. So we'll do that. We're gonna grab some of our, these are all the same size. Bless you, Toyota, you good people at Toyota and Lexus. But the way this all worked was this guy goes right there. And we'll get that seated on there here momentarily. And you know, as they say, if it seats, it eats. So once you get that seated, don't ever feel bad about using your impact. Easy peasy right there, folks. We got one up on top here that holds our airflow sensor, part of the wiring harness. And again, you just get it started. I try not to start these with the impact because that tends to be when you go sideways with them, literally. That's it, right there. Whoop, we nearly lost our 10. It's already hit the ground once. These things, I swear I should buy them by the bin. Okay, and then we got this last connector right there that goes there, and this guy actually slots over that. And you can see how that fits then right onto that spot. So this is our last real bolt of the project here, is to get this guy seated. So we're gonna do our best not to drop it and try to find its home here. Sometimes you just gotta hunt for it a little bit. Well, I'm having trouble seeing this, and we're gonna take a pause here just to come back to you in a minute once we start putting everything back together. But yeah, this is pretty much complete. So once we get the airbox back on, we'll fire the car up, make sure we don't have any codes, and we'll kind of go from there. So everything else is pretty straightforward. I don't think you guys necessarily need to see putting the plastic panels back on and all that. You'll figure it out. Again, one last reminder, I'll probably jump back in with this, is don't forget to hook this guy up right here. You'll forget that, or this guy right here, when you put the airbox in. I'll often even loop it around the engine oil thing, so it's much easier to see. You just don't want to forget that stuff. Make sure you get this seal good and tight here around your inlet. You can just go sideways if you forget one of these dumb evap pipes or something like that. So we'll be back with you, but yeah, it looks like we're kind of rounding third on the project here, and we'll go from there. Well, folks, here we are, moment of truth as we go to fire our GX up here and see if our spark plug swap worked. No misfires, no misfires, no misfires. She's running. All right. No weird noises. All right, I think we got it. which is great. So with that being said, guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for liking and subscribing. I hope this was somewhat helpful. I would rate this as a relatively straightforward job, but something that's going to be pretty challenging for someone who doesn't have a full set of tools. So next thing we need to do is actually wash this thing, because it's trash right now and it's gotten rained on multiple times. But again, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Hope you guys have a great day.